favorite moments in the movie is when Johnny goes in that awkward audition and they're passing around the video. I won't say what that was not to spoil anything. I'm wondering for each of you, the worst audition, most awkward audition you've ever had in your career.
Wow, I went to screen tested for Avatar at
Really?
and the audition was at James Cameron's house, and I was like, oh,
As a blue,
yeah,
blue alien?
Yeah, no, I did. I did, and it was, strangely enough, he's such a genius. He, for whatever reason, he felt the lighting was best in the kitchen. So I did the screen test in James Cameron's kitchen, and he was like rolling around on the floor, like shooting me from all these angles, and it just threw my concentration off, and I tanked. Like I can't even imagine what this audition looks like.
I want to see this.
I was so psyched out by James Cameron, and which is probably what he was trying to do. You know, it just, yeah. I
Didn't get the part?
I did not get the part.
Okay.
Yeah. And for you, a most awkward audition?
Entourage.
I actually auditioned for Woody Allen, and I walked into a darkened hotel room, and there was a single light on a chair, and I sat there and I was doing the scene with like somebody in the darkness, and I could feel Woody Allen lurking and coming from the darkness into the light. I could barely make out his face, and then I stopped. The scene was over. I looked, and he scurried away. Okay, thank you. And then I was like, all right, that's it.
You know, I think I told Jerry this one at one stage, but I was doing an audition for Rhea Perlman, and it was a really cool part that I wanted. I felt really prepared, but I actually smoked cigarettes back in the day, and I was like dying for a cigarette. So I ran down in New York City. I ran down like 4 flights of stairs to go outside and have a cigarette. Someone goes, "Hey, they're calling you, Dillon. You gotta get in here." So then I ran all the way back up the steps. So by the time I was in front of her, I was just sweating.
Out of
I was
breath.
puffing and puffing, and she thought I was just an absolute nervous wreck having a breakdown. It was just awful. It was
Guess you
terrible
didn't get
audition.
that one.
I did not.
You did not get that one.
She actually felt so sorry for me. You could just tell she was like, "Oh."
I actually remember being in an audition room and then hearing like the casting assistant outside talking about the offer for the role of the part I'm auditioning for.
Oh
So they were
my God.
literally sending out an offer to someone while I'm in there. I'm like B squad moment. Like,
What?
okay.
Casey falls out.
Yeah, I was basically auditioning for 3rd place.
So in the opening credits of the show, obviously, you had the Jane's Addiction song, and you had the classic shot of you guys over the head getting out of the car. And then in this movie, Doug actually has a scene where you guys get in the car with the 4 doors closing. I'm sure it was kind of like a metaphor, symbolism to kind of getting back into the show. But how did they shoot that shot and the timing? How does that all work out? Do you remember doing it for the show credits?
Yeah, you remember that night?
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's actually not. We actually sort of have always been good at kind of moving together as one sort
You have
of
to learn
unit.
quickly because there's a lot of stubbed toes. And
Yeah, but
awkward moments.
we've gotten comfortable at getting in and out of cars and that
And by the
kind
way,
of
it's a
thing.
life or death thing because there's suicide doors.
That's
So
right.
if you don't get it right, you
Yeah.
lose hands and limbs.
Right.
But it does seem to be.
Like the timing is so perfect.
Yeah. I'm sure there was probably a few takes where it wasn't so perfect.
Yeah.
We just got a good one. All you need is one.
So basically, there's an over the head shot. How do they get that shot? Like, is it just cool to be there on set when they're filming? Is it over the crane? How do they do it?
That was a crazy night. That was when they did the one for the TV
For the show.
We went until like 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was coming up, and we had to do that so many times to get those doors to shut perfectly.
The same exact
in
time
sync.
the crane comes
And
down.
we were just so
yeah.
tired. That was just an exhausting moment to get
Right.
that. I don't think I've ever been so tired on the set. as
But
that
it's good
day.
because you're not knowing it at the time. We'd be seeing that shot
over and over and
you
over
know,
again,
96 times.
Yeah.
right, of episode 96 times because we did 96
So you
episodes.
got to get it right.
So you have
gotta
to
get it right.
And then
You can't
Doug-
have one door closed before the other.
Now, I'm a big nerd about how movies are made. I always want to know, like, with the movies that you shoot within the show and the movie, like Aquaman, and then obviously High with this one, those are so cinematic looking, and now you're in a movie world shooting a movie, but also making a movie. Are those shot on different days? How do you do those? Like, what do those set pieces look like when you do those moments?
Well, Doug made the decision, I think, smartly to bring in a separate director for the movie, and we brought back Mark Mylod, who
Directed probably 40 episodes of
Yeah.
the show.
Oh,
and really defined a much of the look and feel of Entourage itself. But he's just such a talented director, so he gave him carte blanche to make this
to
into.
make Hyde so it looked just very, very, very different from the
separate
movie.
cinematically
Yeah,
from this
separate
movie.
cinematically.
Under,
Yeah.
of course, Vincent Chase's direction.
Theoretically, Vincent Chase.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Mark Mylod really
Yeah.
did.
Now, obviously, you played these characters for 96 episodes. Now you're taking on in a movie again. I'm wondering, kind of a 2-part question. What is an element of Vincent E that you took away that is now in your own personality, and then the opposite, what did you put into them from your own personalities?
Well, I always really enjoyed the early days of creating this character because I was tasked to, create a star, basically somebody, and I was like, well, what is a star? A star is uniquely himself, so it gave me a lot of permission to just play and put a lot of myself into it. And I always thought that Vince had to be sort of just floating above everything, couldn't get bogged down in all of the, the pitfalls, so he had to have this sort of even-keeled detachment.
I have this weird thing, and it sounds strange, and I've said this to my friends. I mean, obviously I'm an actor, but I believe that after playing E for all these years, I think I would be a pretty good manager.
Yeah, you would be.
I think if I just quit and just decided to be.
Should I fire Lev?
You should fire. I'll represent. Yeah, no, I think I actually learned a lot about the business and the representation business, even from Ari Gold and like my character. I feel like I'd be a good representative to an actor. So
that would be awesome to watch. Now, I was interviewing your brother the other day, Matt Dillon, for Wayward Pines, the Fox show, and we were taking fan questions, and he asked me to tell you, said you owe him a pinball machine. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
Is this true? Can you explain this to me?
Well, I collect pinball machines, and I kind of restore them.
Oh, wow.
I'll fix them up and stuff. And I've got my whole family into them now. So
is there one you owe him
they're all
specifically?
playing. You know what? They're all into Fun House right now, which I set up at my mom's house. But I got like 15 great pinball machines, all the best ones ever made.
One thing that was fascinating, and there's jokes in the movie about your weight loss.
Yes.
And Ronda Rousey even says, "Didn't you used to be really fat or something like that?" And one thing that always bothers me when people say if someone loses weight, they're automatically not funny anymore, which I completely disagree with. And I know people hear that all the time.
I have heard that.
Jonah
quite
Hill
often.
heard that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do you feel about that in the sense of that's so untrue, but it's ridiculous that someone losing weight would make them not funny.
I've never understood it. And I still will see tweets from people like, oh, you were funnier when you were fatter. Look, I just think you're either funny or you're not.
Right.
So the people who maybe say that, maybe they just thought I was never funny. I just don't understand. It doesn't really make sense to me unless you're talking about you really enjoyed fat jokes. Then okay, yes, maybe you'll miss those. But outside of that, I don't really understand the.
You're funnier now. Than you were then.
I think you're funny.
The history,
I have to ask you about the arm scene when Ronda Rousey has you in the arm lock. Great scene, great shot, but it looked painful. Was there ever a moment where you thought your arm was going to break? How did they do that?
No, because I trust her because she's such a pro and great at what she does, and also knowing she doesn't really want to hurt me in real life. But even just in a state of relaxation, like they're setting up the camera for a different shot, and we're just in the position so they could line it up, even with no pressure whatsoever, just laying there. After a while, I just was like, oh my God, I feel my shoulder just unnaturally moving out of the joint. So even I could only imagine what that's felt like for the women that she's put in it and applied pressure. It's one of my worst nightmares. That is just a very vulnerable position to be in.
I was going to say, guys, this has been an honor to be here.
Oh,
I had so many more questions
appreciate
for
it,
you, but
man.
just as a fan of the show, thank you for the movie.
Oh,
I needed it.
Glad
So.
you
It's
enjoyed
for
it.
you,
Yeah,
man.
we did.
It's for you.
We had legs.
Smallest hands in the UFC.
Do you really?
The extra small gloves that the 115-pound girls use, I can fit 4 fingers in 3 holes.
Real? Did they make special gloves for you?
For one fight they had to, but now I
Really?
just use the straw weight gloves. But my hands are smaller than a tiny little.
Let me see. Oh, wow.
And I have really thin bones. I broke this thumb and cut that open.
Well, now the fight with you and Turtle's incredible. I love that fight scene. I'm wondering, when you have to act out a fight versus your real fights in real life, in the sense of is it harder to fake it versus really do it?
The only thing that really is hard to do with fights for film is I have to not have so much defense because I'm used to always guarding my face. And if I'm having a fight, I'm going like this the whole time. You can't see me, so I have to kind of punch in a way that is I would consider inaccurate. But other than that, no, it's pretty cool that when you create a fight scene, it's like, what would you want a fight to be like? It's kind of cool. I do it all the time when I'm in training camp, where I think of what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, and so when I'm imagining scenarios over and over and over for a fight to be prepared, it's like I can imagine any scenario I want, and we can act it out, and it's actually an awesome time.
Wow. And then the moment when you actually have his arm in an arm lock. I mean, that because that's a classic UFC move, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
is there any danger at all to his arm whatsoever in the shot we're seeing? Because that looked pretty insanely painful to me.
Well, I'm very well acquainted with the anatomy of an elbow, so I know how to keep it safe.
That's cool.
But I also know how to do the opposite.
Right. Yeah. Now talk about obviously being in this universe because there's so many different cameos, but yours really stands out obviously because your part's bigger. It's more of a part in the movie versus just like a quick shot of a character they'll show everyone like Bob Saget for a couple seconds or something like that. Do you actually film everything within like 1 or 2 days, or do you come back during the production throughout to do your scenes?
Well, the cool thing about Entourage being filmed in LA is that I could dip in and out. And so I fought Sarah McMahon, and then I did a couple scenes here and there throughout the month, which was cool because I was in town. So they're like, hey, you want to stop by San Pedro today? I'm like, sure. It wasn't like I had to go off on vacation, on location. And we did the pickup scene with Jerry later after Connolly's leg had healed. And that was cool because I was actually in the first week of camp. And that's the week where I put on the most muscle and like I eat a lot. And I was a little self-conscious. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be in a movie and I'm at my most bulked out stage. But it ended up being perfect for the scene because it was so much funnier when I look scary all of a sudden.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm all like, tiny and demure.
Traps. It was like, it looks
because
awesome.
between fights, I get like really small. I lose a lot of muscle. So the earlier scenes when me and Turtle are meeting, I look a lot less intimidating. And then in the gym scene, it's the first week of camp when I'm all swolled up. That's part of the cycle. And it is hilarious when he walks in, I'm suddenly like, rah, So, I went from self-conscious about it to like, thinking that it happened during that time because it was perfect for the scene.
I want to ask you, when you're playing yourself in a movie, how much of it is actually acting in the sense of like when you have to play yourself? How does that work?
Well, it's actually acting when you have to be yourself when they say go. But it was cool because I'm new to the acting business and I'm new to comedy. I usually do action, and so it was nice that in this step over into a new genre, I was able to be myself because the world expert on being me is me. So no one can say that I'm doing it wrong. And so it gave me a lot more confidence than I would have had otherwise.
That's cool. But in there, are there scenes where like they write for you, go, I wouldn't do that. That wouldn't be something that Ronda Rousey would do. Like, do you have to like change that at all, or does he just go along with what Doug has?
A little bit, but only like tiny things. They did a really good job of really capturing what I would say in certain situations. So we met beforehand, and they got a feel of my vernacular. During training camp, I met with them, and I never do that. I had one meeting during training camp, and when they wrote the script, I was like, this is really, really accurate, actually. And there was like a sentence or a word here and there, but they did a great job.
I want to talk to you because you've had such an interesting career just in regards to all the movies you've done. You started off like your first feature film was Forrest Gump years ago. I want to ask you the things you learned back then from Zemeckis, someone like M. Night Shyamalan, even Kevin Smith recently with Tusk. Do you take parts of those directors onto the sets like this? Is there something in this movie you would have done that Zemeckis taught you, or M. Night Shyamalan?
I guess, going back as far as Zemeckis, like I actually have pretty clear memories of making that movie, and for Forrest Gump, that was like one of the first times I'd ever been on an airplane and flown out of the state of California, and seeing Tom Hanks and his focus on set, and just working under the guidance of Bob Zemeckis. And all those directors were just so generous in not just treating me like a kid. They're very very open about the process and rehearsing and everything. Maybe when I was 4 years old, maybe not so much with Zemeckis, but I put a thing on Instagram a couple months ago that I still have this piece of yellow legal pad that right before we shot the final scene in Forrest Gump with the feather at the bus stop, Tom and Robert Zemeckis rewrote the last couple lines, and Tom Hanks wrote out my sides for me in his handwriting on this little legal pad, and I still have it. My parents luckily saved it from that day.
That's so cool.
This really, takes you back.
Now, as we watch this movie, we're dealing with your character and Bob Thornton's character in the idea of financing, co-financing this film. And I'm wondering, throughout the years in this business, have you ever been involved in the financing side? Like, have you seen this ever happen? Have you met people like you in the movie?
Absolutely, and I think that was Doug's intention, part of his intention in putting these characters in the film, because I think everybody who's worked in movies will recognize this character of financiers who have become very wealthy through other means, and then they're stepping into the movie industry, sometimes not always with the best of intentions, And Travis, my character, is just in Hollywood because he wants to get girls, wants to drive his Lamborghini around, wants to hang out with movie stars. So, and we can see how stressful it is for someone like Ari who actually cares about the product that they're making.
What I find interesting about you is that you've had such a great career in the sense of like every role you've done has been different from everything you've done. Like, I mean, I just watched you in Tusk. I just told you that this is completely different from anything you've done before.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to not be the Sixth Sense kid? Like, how important was that for you to step away? I think you did that. I personally think you did that. So I'm wondering, was that important to you later on in life? Or?
I guess we didn't necessarily think about it in those terms. Luckily, when you're making movies that young, just by the virtue of getting older, it changes the roles that you can be available for. And I can't really remember if there was a lot of like horror movies that people wanted to make after the Sixth Sense or something. But yeah, it probably would have been really redundant to go and do a character similar to that. But I've just been really lucky. Right after that was AI. Got to totally
Pay It Forward.
crazy movie. Pay It Forward was after that, and then Secondhand Lions, and then now I'm a bit older and getting to play like villains like this that's sort of a new experience for me.
You've had your own Boyhood experience basically in Hollywood.
Yeah.